Welcome to the Mental Podcast, where we discuss your deepest fears and how to make them a reality. Let's get started.
Well, look at that. You didn't overthrow a government. You didn't summon lightning. You didn't scream into the sky or beg the universe for mercy. You just did one little thing right. One decision, one adjustment, one move that actually landed. And somehow that was enough to make the room feel colder. Enough to make people start whispering like you cracked a forbidden seal. Funny how that works. They watched you struggle for years and felt nothing. They watched you doubt yourself and felt comfortable. They watched you bleed quietly and called it character development. But the second something works, the second reality tilts even a fraction in your favor, they start acting like you opened a back door to hell and let something intelligent crawl out. That's the part they don't want to admit. It wasn't the scale of what you did. It was the accuracy. You didn't flail. You didn't get lucky in a sloppy way they could dismiss. You didn't trip into success the way they're used to seeing. You moved with intent. And intent scares people who survive by accident. You aligned one thing, just one. And suddenly the air changed. Suddenly the jokes stopped landing. Suddenly your name started traveling without you. You could feel it, couldn't you? That quiet recalibration, like the world paused for half a second, and everyone realized something had shifted, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Because if they say it out loud, they have to explain it. And explanation is where the panic starts. You see, people can tolerate failure. They can tolerate chaos. They can tolerate broken dreams and half-finished potential because it reassures them that the universe is messy and unfair in a way that excuses their own stagnation. But competence, precision, a clean result born from pressure, that breaks the story. That introduces an uncomfortable variable. If you can do that after everything they saw you go through, then maybe the rules they've been hiding behind aren't real. Maybe the ceiling isn't fixed. Maybe the cage was optional. And that thought spreads fast. Too fast. Faster than logic. Faster than reason. It spreads like fear. So they don't call it skill. They don't call it growth. They don't call it discipline or patience or accumulated pain finally finding leverage. No, they reach for something darker, something easier, something that lets them keep their worldview intact. They say you must have cheated reality. They say you changed too fast. They say something's off. They say no one does that without help. And help, in their vocabulary, doesn't mean mentors or effort or time. It means deals. It means shortcuts. It means shadows. It means the devil. And notice how fast they go there. How comfortable they are turning your progress into a conspiracy. As if you couldn't possibly evolve without violating some cosmic contract. As if your mind couldn't sharpen itself unless something unholy was involved. That tells you everything you need to know about how small they've kept their own expectations. Because when someone has never gone all in on themselves, anyone who does looks possessed. You didn't become impressive. You became inconvenient. That's the real trigger. Your success didn't inspire them. It destabilized them. It made old conversations feel fake. Old hierarchies feel fragile. Old jokes feel dangerous. Because you weren't supposed to be the one who figured it out. You were supposed to stay in your lane, stay experimental, stay almost there, stay harmless. You were the safe comparison, the person they could point to and say, see, trying hard doesn't always work. And then you did one thing right, and the whole comparison collapsed. Now they have to rewrite history to survive the present. So they start tracking you differently. They watch your timing, your posture, your tone. They read into pauses that mean nothing, They screenshot progress like it's evidence. They look for signs, patterns, symbols, anything that suggests your rise isn't legitimate. Because if it is legitimate, then their inaction becomes a choice instead of a circumstance, and that's unbearable. So they don't say you worked, they say you changed, and they don't mean it as growth, they mean it as corruption, like something touched you, like you crossed a line you weren't supposed to cross. Here's the truth they won't face. You didn't cross a line. You stopped respecting one that never applied to you. You learned something they never did. That pain isn't just something to survive. It's something to study. While they were numbing, you were observing. While they were performing resilience, you were reverse engineering your own collapse. You paid attention to what broke you. You mapped it. You figured out where you leaked energy, where you hesitated, where you waited for permission that never came. And when you finally acted, it wasn't chaotic. It was surgical. That's why it looked unreal. That's why it didn't match their expectations. Because they mistake noise for effort and confuse struggle with virtue. You didn't get louder, you got clearer. And clarity terrifies people who rely on confusion to stay comfortable. So now the rumors start. Quiet at first. Half jokes, side comments. That look they give each other when your name comes up. You feel it. The sudden shift from amusement to assessment. They're no longer asking if you'll fail. They're asking how far this goes. And worse, whether it affects them. Because deep down, they sense it. Your win wasn't isolated. It was a proof of concept, a demonstration, a live example of what happens when someone stops leaking their power into doubt and starts applying it with intent. That's why it feels like a panic button got pressed. Not because you're taking something from them, but because you're showing what's possible. And possibility is radioactive to people who have already decided they're done evolving. They don't hate you because you succeeded. They hate you because you succeeded without their permission, without their blessing, without fitting the narrative they agreed on when they decided who you were. You violated the agreement, the unspoken one, the one where you stay predictable and they stay superior. So now they mythologize you. They turn your discipline into obsession, your focus into darkness, your boundaries into arrogance, your silence into threat. They talk about your energy like it's a hazard, like being around you requires protection. And the wild part is, they half believe it. Because it's easier to imagine you made a deal with something external than accept that you finally made a deal with yourself. The kind that doesn't expire. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. You didn't summon anything. You remembered. You remembered what you were like before you learned to shrink. Before you learned to explain yourself. Before you learned to soften your instincts so other people wouldn't feel exposed by them. You remembered the version of you that didn't negotiate with fear. And when you let that version steer, even briefly, reality responded, not magically, mechanically, because cause and effect doesn't care about comfort. That's what they can't stand, that your result has a logic they can't refute without indicting themselves. So they escalate the narrative. It's not just luck anymore. It's not just timing. It's something darker, something unnatural. Because unnatural means unrepeatable. And if it's unrepeatable, they don't have to try. They can sit back and say, well, not everyone gets chosen. Not everyone gets that kind of favor. They can turn your work into mythology and their fear into theology. Meanwhile, you're just standing there, watching the ripples spread, realizing how fragile their confidence actually was. You thought you were invisible. Turns out you were a variable. one that hadn't been activated yet. And the moment you were, the system started glitching. People who never checked on you suddenly check your progress. People who never listened suddenly quote you. People who never believed suddenly speculate. And none of it feels flattering. It feels clinical, like you're being observed instead of celebrated, like something about you moved from background noise to anomaly status overnight. You didn't ask for it, you didn't chase it, you just aligned one thing correctly and exposed how misaligned everything else was. That's why the devil story sticks. Devils are convenient. Devils explain disruption without demanding accountability. Devils let people feel moral instead of inadequate. And in their minds, it makes sense. Because what else could explain how someone they dismissed just rewrote the trajectory? What else could explain how someone who used to struggle quietly now moves with a certainty that unsettles rooms? They don't see the years. They see the result and panic. They don't see the nights you disassembled yourself piece by piece, trying to figure out why nothing worked. They don't see the restraint it took not to burn bridges you could have destroyed out of spite. They don't see the discipline of staying quiet while being misunderstood. They just see the moment the switch flipped and assume something supernatural happened, as if the human mind isn't capable of terrifying levels of recalibration under pressure. Here's the irony. If you had failed loudly, they would have praised your courage. If you had stayed broken, they would have called you authentic. But you succeeded cleanly. And clean success after prolonged struggle is the one thing they can't metabolize. It doesn't fit the inspirational posters or the cautionary tales. It just sits there, undeniable, forcing questions no one wants to ask. Like, what if the limits were always optional? Like, what if suffering wasn't the end of the story? Like, what if you weren't special, just unwilling to stay asleep? Those questions feel dangerous, so they drown them in superstition. They whisper about deals and darkness and energy shifts, not realizing what they're really reacting to is control. You took it back, quietly, efficiently, and now you move differently, not desperate, not performative, not hungry for approval. You move like someone who knows something and doesn't feel the need to explain it. And that, more than any success, sets off alarms. Because people can compete with skill. They can envy talent. They can even tolerate wealth. What they can't tolerate is autonomy they don't understand. Someone who isn't reacting to the same incentives. Someone who doesn't flinch when the usual levers get pulled. Someone who no longer responds to shame, doubt, or ridicule the way they're supposed to. That's when the devil narrative turns from joke to coping mechanism. They need to believe you paid a price they wouldn't pay, that you sacrificed something essential, your soul, your humanity, your morality, because if the alternative is that you simply stopped betraying yourself, then the question becomes unavoidable. Why didn't they? And that question is loud, louder than any rumor, louder than any accusation. It follows them home. It sits with them in silence. It shows up when they scroll and see you still moving forward, still compounding, still unfazed. They start wondering if the panic they feel isn't about you at all, but about the part of themselves they abandoned years ago. That's when the narrative mutates. It stops being curiosity and turns into containment. Because curiosity can be survived. Containment is about safety, their safety. Your existence has become a destabilizing variable, and destabilizing variables must be explained, framed, neutralized. So the story tightens, it sharpens, it evolves from whispers into certainty. They stop saying maybe and start saying definitely. Definitely a deal. Definitely something dark. Definitely a not normal. Because normal people don't recalibrate reality like that. Normal people don't flip trajectories with one clean move. Normal people don't break patterns that were supposed to be permanent. But here's the part that really unsettles them. You didn't just win. You didn't just succeed. You didn't just move ahead. You invalidated assumptions. And assumptions are the foundation they've been standing on. Assumptions about talent, about timing, about who gets to rise and who stays in place, about who deserves momentum and who exists to serve as a cautionary tale. You weren't supposed to be the proof that effort plus clarity beats hierarchy. You weren't supposed to be the one who made the formula obvious, so they do what people always do when faced with evidence that threatens their identity. They mythologize it. They turn your progress into folklore. They inflate it until it no longer feels reachable. They exaggerate the speed, the scale, the impact. They act like what you did was impossible instead of improbable. And in doing so, they give themselves permission to stop trying. Because no one expects themselves to compete with the impossible. But they do expect themselves to compete with someone who simply stopped sabotaging themselves. And that's the truth they're running from. You can feel the shift in how they talk to you now. It's subtle, but unmistakable. Less casual, more careful. The jokes have an edge. The compliments feel defensive. The questions aren't really questions. They're probes, fishing for inconsistencies, looking for cracks, trying to find evidence that this version of you is unsustainable, that something is going to snap. Because if it doesn't, then this isn't a phase. It's a new baseline. And baselines are terrifying. Baselines mean permanence. That's why the devil imagery keeps surfacing. Devils don't just tempt. They demand repayment. Devils always collect. Devils imply a clock is ticking, and they need that clock. They need to believe this version of you has an expiration date. That there will be a cost, a collapse, a reckoning, something that restores the balance they were comfortable with. Because if there isn't, then the imbalance was never natural. It was just enforced by fear. And fear, once exposed, doesn't hold power the same way. What they don't understand is that the price was already paid. Long before anyone noticed. You paid it in isolation, in restraint, in swallowing reactions that would have felt justified but led nowhere. You paid it in nights where nothing moved except your thoughts, in days where effort felt invisible, in moments where quitting would have made sense and no one would have blamed you. You paid the price in advance. That's why the result looks unfair to people who only count costs at the finish line. From the outside, it looks like acceleration. From the inside, it feels like delayed ignition. That's what flips the switch from suspicion to panic. They realize, slowly, that this isn't fragile, that you're not holding your breath, that you're not waiting for approval or validation or the other shoe to drop. You're not asking if it's okay to take up space now. You're not explaining yourself. You're not negotiating. And that tells them something far worse than success ever could. It tells them you're no longer operating on their emotional economy. You're not trading in reassurance. You're not spending energy to be understood. You're not paying attention to the signals they use to control you. And that's when the panic goes global. Not literal global, of course. Not sirens and headlines, but internal, social, psychological. It spreads through conversations, through group chats, through sideways comments and shared glances, through people comparing notes without admitting they're comparing notes. They start noticing patterns, noticing that wherever you go, the atmosphere tightens, that rooms feel different after you leave, that people bring you up unprompted, that your name carries weight now, even when spoken casually. Weight is dangerous. Weight bends structures. So they start asking each other the same question in different ways. How did this happen? When did this happen? And more importantly, could it happen again? Could someone else do what you did? Because if the answer is yes, then the whole hierarchy is unstable. And hierarchies exist to protect people from having to test themselves. They exist to tell people where they belong without effort. You didn't just climb, you shook the ladder. That's why they don't talk about your work. They talk about your change. Change implies loss. Change implies corruption. Change implies that something was taken from you in exchange for power. Because power earned through discipline is threatening. Power earned through sacrifice is unsettling. But power earned through deals, that can be dismissed, that can be moralized, that can be condemned without reflection. So they condemn it. They say you're too intense now, too focused, too cold, too confident. They say you're not like you used to be, as if that's an accusation instead of a diagnosis, as if the old version of you wasn't bleeding internally to make them comfortable, as if staying the same would have been a virtue. They mourn the version of you that made them feel safe, the version that asked permission, the version that explained themselves, the version that stayed small enough to be predictable. They call this version unnatural, because nature terrifies people who've been living inside routines. And here's where it gets interesting, because the more they talk, the more they reveal. Every accusation is a confession. When they say you're possessed, what they mean is you're no longer pliable. When they say you're dark, what they mean is you're no longer transparent. When they say you made a deal, what they mean is you stopped accepting bad ones. You didn't summon anything external. You cut internal ties. That's what they can't articulate. That's what makes their language sloppy and dramatic. They're trying to describe the absence of something they relied on. Your doubt, your hesitation, your need to be liked. Those were levers. Those were access points. Those were ways to influence you without appearing to. And now those access points are gone, closed, sealed, and any closed system looks suspicious to people who were used to walking in and out freely. So they imagine locks, they imagine gates, they imagine guards, they imagine devils. Because devils guard power in stories. Devils explain why not everyone gets access. Devils make power feel exclusive instead of earned. And exclusivity comforts people who didn't choose the work. It lets them say, well, of course I couldn't do that. I wasn't invited. I wasn't chosen. I didn't have the connection, the alignment, the darkness. They don't want to hear that all you did was stop lying to yourself. And here's the part that really presses the panic button. You're not loud about it. You're not announcing your transformation. You're not preaching. You're not trying to convert anyone. You're just moving. Quietly. Effectively. And that silence reads as confidence. Confidence reads as threat. Threat triggers scrutiny. And scrutiny finds nothing. No scandal. No collapse. No self-destruction. Just consistency. Consistency is the one thing superstition can't fight. That's when the tone shifts again. From accusation to observation. They stop saying you're wrong and start asking how you did it. But they don't ask you directly. They ask around you. They study you from a distance. They imitate pieces without understanding the structure. They copy aesthetics without adopting discipline. They try to replicate outcomes without confronting the internal work that made them possible. And when it doesn't work, When the imitation fails, they double down on the myth. See? It only worked for them. It's not natural, but you know the truth. And the truth is almost boring in its simplicity. You stopped leaking energy into self-betrayal. You stopped postponing alignment. You stopped negotiating with fear. You did one little thing right. And that one thing wasn't magical. It was honest, painfully honest. The kind of honesty that strips excuses bare and leaves you with responsibility instead of comfort. That's the deal they refuse to make. Because that deal doesn't involve devils or destiny or darkness. It involves accountability. It involves admitting that for a long time they chose the easier narrative, the safer role, the predictable loop. And now they're watching someone step out of that loop, and they don't know how to process it without mythologizing it into something inhuman. So they panic. They panic because this isn't contained, because you're not done, because they can feel, even if they won't admit it, that what they're witnessing isn't a peak. It's a pattern that compounds, a pattern that spreads, a pattern that suggests the world might be less fixed than they were promised. And if that's true, then comfort was always optional. Then stagnation was a choice. Then the devil they're afraid of isn't the one they imagine watching you. It's the one staring back at them from inside their own skull. The one that knows they recognized the door when it appeared and chose not to open it. The one that remembers every moment they almost acted and then talked themselves out of it with logic dressed up as wisdom. The one that whispers, not accusingly, but factually, that if the world isn't fixed, if trajectories can be bent, if patterns can be rewritten, then they didn't miss their chance. They declined it. And watching you move forward forces that realization into the open where it can't be numbed anymore. That's why your progress feels invasive to them. It's not loud. It's not chaotic. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists, steadily, undeniably. And that steadiness is what cracks them. Because chaos can be dismissed. Noise can be ignored. Luck can be explained away. But a pattern? A pattern implies intention. A pattern implies repeatability. A pattern implies that what you did wasn't a fluke. It was a decision followed through without self-betrayal. And that terrifies them more than any supernatural explanation ever could. Because if what you did can be repeated, then the hierarchy they trusted isn't divine. It's just inertia. And inertia only holds power over people who stop pushing. You didn't push harder than everyone else. You pushed cleaner. You stopped wasting force on doubt, on optics, on trying to be understood. You directed everything at one point and let the result speak. That's why they can't trace it. That's why it feels unreal. There's no dramatic origin story they can latch on to. No moment where you asked permission, no visible ritual, just execution. So they fill in the blanks with darkness. They start saying things like, something's not right, without being able to explain what's wrong. They say, people don't just do that, as if history hasn't been written almost exclusively by people who did exactly that. They say, there must be a cost because they need to believe you'll be punished for stepping out of line. They need to believe the universe enforces obedience because if it doesn't, then they enforced it on themselves for nothing. That's when the fear sharpens. Not fear of you doing well, fear of you doing more. Fear that this isn't your ceiling, but your baseline. Fear that what they're watching now is you operating at partial capacity, testing the mechanics, calibrating your output. Because they can feel it. You're not rushing, you're not frantic, you're not trying to prove anything. You move like someone who finally understands leverage. And leverage in the hands of someone who no longer seeks validation is destabilizing. They start wondering what happens when you apply this same precision again, and again, and again. That's when the panic becomes contagious. It spreads through conversations the way unease always does, indirectly. Someone mentions you casually. Someone else goes quiet. Someone changes the subject too fast. Someone laughs a little too hard. Because now your name doesn't just represent a person. It represents a possibility they didn't prepare for. The possibility that effort wasn't the issue. The possibility that clarity beats chaos. The possibility that most people don't fail because they lack ability, but because they never stop negotiating with fear. And you stopped. That's the unforgivable part. You didn't rebel loudly. You didn't burn bridges for spectacle. You didn't declare war. You simply withdrew your consent from the version of reality that kept you small. And the moment you did, the structure started shaking. Not collapsing yet, shaking. Enough for everyone inside it to feel unsafe. So they talk about devils and deals because it's easier than saying they chose themselves. Because saying that opens a door they're terrified to walk through. Because once that door is open, there's no excuse left. No narrative to hide behind. No moral high ground. Just the quiet, brutal realization that the cage was never locked. And now they're watching someone walk free, not running, not preaching, not dragging anyone with them. Just walking like they know where they're going. And that's what pushes the panic button hardest of all. Not the move you made, not the outcome, not even the speed at which everything around you rearranged itself to accommodate this new version of you. No, what really sets them spiraling is the quiet certainty you carry now. The kind that can't be imitated or borrowed or faked. It's the energy of someone who is no longer negotiating with fear, no longer rehearsing ways to stay small, no longer trying to maintain the comfort of people who were never invested in seeing you become anything more than predictable. You aren't sprinting, you aren't stumbling, you're simply walking, straight, steady, unapologetic. And in that simplicity, there is something unnerving, something they can't measure, something they can't dilute with explanations. You walk like you know exactly what you unlocked. Because you do. And that alone is enough to make them rewrite the entire mythology around you. Suddenly, everything you touch feels charged. Every decision looks intentional. Every silence feels calculated. They look at you the way people look at someone who knows a secret no one else has been granted access to. And since they can't accept the truth, that you finally stopped sabotaging yourself, they fill the gap with superstition, with folklore, with legends that soften the blow to their pride. So they cling to the devil narrative like a life raft. They say no one changes like that without something unnatural guiding them. They say you're moving too fast, too clearly, too decisively. They say your eyes look different. Your presence feels heavier. Your timing too sharp to be human. They say it jokingly in public and fearfully in private. Because joking is the only way to say something dangerous without admitting you believe it. But they do believe it. They believe it more than they believe their own excuses, because it's easier to call someone cursed than disciplined, easier to call them possessed than focused, easier to call them lucky than accountable. And meanwhile, you just keep walking. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're not trying to correct the rumors or soften the edges of your evolution. You don't have the time or the desire to explain the 1,000 invisible decisions that built this momentum. You're not here to justify clarity, Two people who only feel safe when things are confusing. You're not here to slow down, so the people who underestimated you can catch up emotionally. You're not here to apologize for showing them what consistency actually looks like. You're here to keep moving, because this version of you doesn't need validation. It doesn't need recognition. It doesn't even need to be understood. It just needs to continue. And continuation, for someone who spent years stuck in a cycle of almost, is the most supernatural thing of all. Not because it defies logic, but because it defies the logic they lived by. They were raised to believe in ceilings. You were raised to believe in silence, and silence can do one of two things. It can bury you, or it can forge you. Yours forged you. That's why your momentum feels unreal to them. They saw the silence, but not the sharpening. They saw the loneliness, but not the restructuring. They saw the failures, but not the frameworks you built from them. They saw you flatten, but not the way you listened to your own collapse like a strategist listens to a battlefield. They missed everything essential, and now they're panicking because they can't trace the steps backward. You're not a miracle to them. You're a glitch, or a glitch in the life script they thought everyone was supposed to follow. A glitch in the narrative where some people rise slowly, predictably, safely. A glitch in the hierarchy that was comforting only when it remained intact. You weren't supposed to break through. Not first, not like this. Not with one clean move that redirected the entire trajectory of your life in a way no one prepared to witness. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. They liked you better when you were almost ready, almost strong, almost healed, almost visible. They liked you better when your light flickered, because flickering lights can be ignored. But stable lights, static lights, lights that don't waver anymore, those demand accountability. They expose the shadows people learned to hide in. They expose every excuse, every self-sabotage pattern, every choice to remain dim. Your light didn't become brighter. Theirs stopped being enough. That's the real devil to them. Reflection. Reflection that's too clear. Reflection that doesn't flatter. Reflection that reveals what they were capable of but refused to attempt. They aren't afraid of your power. They're afraid that your power proves theirs wasn't missing, just abandoned. And abandonment is a wound pride cannot survive without retreating into fantasy. So they tell themselves a fantasy. They tell themselves you must have touched something forbidden, that you must have shaken hands with darkness to get results this clean, that you must have bypassed the human struggle somehow, because the alternative is too raw, that someone they dismissed did something they could have done too, if they weren't so committed to feeling safe. And you can feel that fear in them now. It's in the way they look at you too long but speak too little. It's in the way their voice dips when they ask how you've been. It's in the way they check your socials more than they check their messages. It's in the way their throat tightens when you mention future plans. It's in the way their jokes sound less humorous and more hopeful, as if humor can hide the fact that every one of your wins reminds them of 1,000 choices they didn't make. But none of that slows you. It doesn't touch you anymore. You're past the phase where distraction works. You're past the phase where shame can be weaponized against you. You're past the phase where other people's doubt has any elasticity in your mind. You don't even argue with it now. You simply let it slide past you like static, because you've realized something they haven't yet fully accepted. Doubt only matters when you're uncertain. The moment you become certain, doubt becomes background noise, and the background is exactly where you've put them, not out of cruelty, out of necessity, Because the path you're on now doesn't have capacity for spectators who expect explanations. It doesn't have room for people who only show interest after results. It doesn't tolerate anyone who panics at your acceleration instead of respecting it. This path is steep, sharp, and single file. Only the self fits here. Only intention fits here. Only the version of you that refuses to hesitate fits here. That's why the world feels different now. Not because the world changed, but because you're finally aligned with the version of yourself the world was always waiting to meet. You feel heavier in the best way, dense with purpose, dense with direction, dense with the kind of clarity that makes speed irrelevant. You're not moving fast, you're moving precisely. And precision looks supernatural to people who operate on chaos. So they escalate their panic. They gossip louder, but listen harder. They deny everything, but observe everything. They pretend not to care, but memorize your every move. You've become their cautionary tale and their aspiration at the same time. They don't know whether to fear you or follow you, so they do both. They watch you like a threat, but imitate you like a blueprint. They talk about devils, but take notes like disciples. You're not their villain or their hero. You're the interruption, and interruptions are powerful because they don't ask permission to exist. They simply appear and force recalibration. You force them to recalibrate their beliefs, their hierarchy, their self-image, their entire understanding of what's possible. And the mind resists recalibration violently before it accepts it gracefully. They're still in the violent part, the frantic part. The part where denial mixes with fascination, envy blends with admiration, and fear wraps itself around every thought about you. But here's where everything shifts, and you can feel it coming. They haven't even seen what happens when someone like you stabilizes. Up until now, all they've seen is ignition, spark, the early momentum. They think this is the whole show, the final form, the peak moment. They think your rise is the story, but it isn't. Your rise was the announcement. The real story begins when the dust settles and you're still standing, still moving, still calm, still certain. Because rising once can be dismissed as chance. Rising twice can be dismissed as timing. But rising repeatedly, smoothly, quietly, that's when narratives collapse. That's when excuses evaporate. That's when people start whispering not about devils, but destiny. Not about curses, but calculations. Not about magic, but mastery. And mastery, in its purest form, is indistinguishable from divinity to people who never mastered themselves. You didn't make a deal with the devil. You made a deal with the truth. You traded comfort for clarity, approval for autonomy, fear for forward motion. And every time they see you now, they're reminded that the truth always wins eventually. Even when ignored, even when mocked, even when buried, the truth waits. And when it rises with vengeance. That vengeance isn't against them, it's against who you used to be. And they feel that. They feel the intensity of someone who is no longer competing with the world, but with their own former limitations. They feel the weight of someone who is done explaining themselves. They feel the shift of someone who is no longer trying to catch up. Someone who is simply stepping into alignment with what was always there. That's why the worldwide panic button metaphor feels so accurate. Because even though the world didn't literally erupt, your world did. The ecosystem surrounding you destabilized. The assumptions orbiting your identity collapsed. The people who once stood above you suddenly found themselves on shaky ground, not because you pushed them down, but because you rose in a way that made their foundation irrelevant. And now now they're waiting, watching, bracing, because they can feel the next move forming before you've even made it. They don't know what it is. They don't know when it comes. They don't know how it affects them. But they know something. The person who did the one little thing right wasn't a fluke. They were a warning of what happens when a quiet mind becomes a focused one. A warning of what happens when someone stops fearing the dark and starts using it. A warning of what happens when the version of you they dismissed as harmless is replaced by the version of you that understands their own potential with terrifying clarity. You didn't make a deal with the devil. You became the consequence of their doubts. And consequences don't ask permission. They arrive.